Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And this is our Halloween season, October, my favorite month of the year. And tonight we have a fabulous show for you. Now, for all of those who may be new to the show, if you would please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And also please don't forget to give the show a like. Now, my guest tonight, I'm very excited to have Kalila Smith. She is an international psychic medium, paranormal investigator, author, and a lecturer. She is the author of New Orleans Ghosts, Voodoo, and Vampires, Tales from the French Quarter, Miami's Dark Tales, and Afterlife Mysteries Revealed. Kayla is the founder of New Orleans Society. Her psychic work on paranormal investigations have been showcased on Travel Channel. Okay. Sorry everybody. Okay, we're back up. Let me repeat so I can delete that part of the show. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I have a fabulous guest, and my guest is Kalila Smith. She is a international psychic medium, paranormal investigator, an author, and a lecturer. She is the author of New Orleans Ghosts, Voodoo, and Vampires, Tales from the French Quarter, Miami's Dark Tales, and the Afterlife Mysteries Revealed. Kalila Smith is the founder of New Orleans Paranormal and the Occult Society. Her psychic work on paranormal investigations has been showcased on Travel Channel, A&E History Channel, Sci-Fi, BBC, Discovery, and Kalila, what's ID?
That's Investigation Discovery.
Oh, okay. Kalila is also the operator of Haunted History Tours, New Orleans' oldest and largest walking tour. So everyone, with that, let's welcome Kalila to the show. Welcome, Kalila. So nice to have you on the show.
Thank you, Norene. I'm very happy to be here. Very excited to be here. This is always a great time of year. So got a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you are like the expert of the French Quarter and the ghost stories, all the ghost stories that you have. And the viewers and myself, we love ghost stories. And this is our favorite time of the year.
Yes.
So we have we talked about several locations that you also do on your tour that I would love for you to tell the viewers. Now,
okay.
What would you like to start with? Would you like to start with the Sultan's massacre?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, let's start with that one. That one's a very interesting story. It's supposedly one of the city's biggest mass murder mysteries. No one knows who really committed the crimes. The story dates back to the mid-1800s. So, trying to find out the exact date was a little sketchy, but it was during the Civil War time, though. A lot of people don't realize this, but New Orleans did not fight in the Civil War. New Orleans was actually occupied very early on by the Union. So once the Union took over, everybody's Confederate money was no good. Even the wealthiest people lost their homes, lost their property, lost their businesses. For many people, the houses in the French Quarter and their real estate outside of the French Quarter were the only things that they could really hold on to if they were holding on to anything. The house was originally the Lepret family house. Mr. Lepret owned a plantation in St. Bernard Parish outside of New Orleans, and like many wealthy Creoles, they would come in for the winter months. They would have these big, beautiful, lavish homes in the French Quarter, and 3 months out of the year, during the winter opera season, they would leave the plantation, come into the city, and spend the winter in New Orleans. So, that kind of gives you an idea of the magnitude of wealth that these people had, that they could come, and when we're talking about the plantation areas, we're only talking about an hour out. So they weren't coming from, far away just to spend 3 months out of the year in New Orleans. So this was a period of time also in which many of the larger homes in the French Quarter began to be divided up. Some of them fell into ruin at some point in time, but oftentimes numerous families would start sharing the homes, and this is how it ultimately got divided up into apartments, condos, and so forth. Monsieur Lepret was very concerned about losing everything he owned, so he had come into the city and was in one of our local pubs, like people love to hang out at in the French Quarter, and he was discussing his woes with his business associates when he was approached by a gentleman wearing long robes and a big turban on his head, presumably a sultan. This man introduced himself as a sultan from the royal Turkish family, and he offered Monsieur Lepret to rent his home. He explained to him that he had a very large family out on a ship in the Mississippi River, and he needed a home to put these people in. And he provided a lot of documentation. It seems that the Sultan had deposited very large sums of money in the 6 banks around town. So he said he had some pretty good credentials. So after much negotiation, Monsieur Lepret decided to allow the Sultan to move into his home. The rent, of course, went up. And Monsieur Lepret moved his family out, and the Sultan moved his family in. Now, the family consisted of many, many wives. This guy had a lot of wives, a lot of children. He had an army of eunuchs. He had a harem of not only women, but young boys. And up on the 3rd floor of the gallery, the eunuchs would march with their sabers, and they would protect the harem and the Sultan. Now, he was a very secretive guy. He's the one who put all the bars on the windows and doors of the property, and it said that he very rarely went out himself. He had servants, of course, going in and doing his shopping and that sort of thing. Now, the Sultan only lived there about 2 years. And 2 years into his residing there, of course, the neighbors weren't real happy with this guy because for 24/7, it's a party palace. There's people going in and out of the house all hours of the day and night. Music, laughter, opium and incense reeking out of the doors and windows. But 2 years later, the neighbors had kind of gotten used to it. He kind of blended into the scenery. He became a fixture. So it's kind of... I'm sorry?
I just laughed.
It's pretty funny when you think about it. So this lady's walking to work one morning, about 2 years into this, and she's walking down the street. She gets to the corner of Orleans and Dauphine, and she stops, and she just stands there for a while trying to figure out what's different today. And finally she realizes that for the first time in 2 years, it's quiet. There's not a sound coming out of that house. But she becomes aware of a peculiar drip coming down from the gallery above. So she put her hand to her head, and she looks at her hand, and it's blood. So she runs around to the front door on Dauphine Street, and she goes up the steps, and she sees blood coming out from under the door. So she ran over to Royal Street. She got a policeman. They brought some police back. They, of course, knocked down the door. And when the door flew open, they see body parts, wall to wall. Heads, arms, legs, torsos, all cut up into little pieces. They literally had to walk through congealed pools of blood and count the heads to figure out how many people were killed. Now, the Sultan was killed differently, though. This is what's so interesting about this, is that the Sultan was not in this massacre. He's found completely whole, buried alive, in the courtyard, in the garden. They had him dressed in traditional Muslim burial. They had his body all dressed out like you would a prince and buried him. But the only thing is that he had so much dirt and soil shoved into his esophagus, it can only be presumed that he was buried alive. Now, to this day, no one knows who killed the Sultan and his family. For many years, people said pirates. Okay, pirates came in, they robbed him, they killed him. But, you know, living in New Orleans, I've lived here my whole life, and we've, of course, been doing the tours for 21 years. We've done a lot of research on pirates. Pirates were not that quiet. Pirates were very raucous. Pirates had pistols. They're not going to take the time to cut people up. And quite frankly, one of the biggest business for pirates was slavery in the Caribbean. So, you know, if this was pirates going in to rob the guy, they're not going to waste killing people like that. They'd have taken him hostage. The women, the children, even the eunuchs, they could have sold them for a lot of money down in the Caribbean. So that didn't really make a lot of sense. And it was really funny, Norene, because sometimes you just hit a wall with some of these things. I mean, as you probably know, with any kind of paranormal thing, especially back in the 1800s, sometimes you don't get precise history. So you're having to piece together the history to try to figure out what happened in a particular area. And I happened to be watching TV one night. I was watching a History Channel show, and they were talking about customs in early Turkey. And I found out that up until the very late 1800s, they had a very peculiar custom. Now, if you've got a lot of wives and a lot of children, and you're very wealthy, this of course means you have a lot of heirs to the throne. So if the Sultan passes away, the oldest son would take the crown of Sultan. Now this guy wants to make sure that his lineage, his children, are next in line for that crown. Not a brother, not a half-brother, or one of their children. And it was actually customary during a large percentage of the 1800s that these new sultans would hire professional assassins and kill off their brothers and their families to avoid them being in line for the throne. These people hid out all over the world and just to try to save their lives. So we believe now that this particular prince was not really a sultan, but the brother of a sultan. And he was actually probably hiding his family here. And apparently the assassins found him and had been ordered to kill everyone. And this would explain why they treated him a little bit differently. They didn't have the forensics, of course, that we do today. So, a lot of people assume that maybe he was either hit over the head or maybe they poisoned him, and he wasn't quite dead when they buried him. But the Sultan's ghost still walks the halls of that 4-story mansion on Dauphine Street. The lady that used to live there actually did an interview with the newspaper quite a few years ago, and it was called Life with an Exotic Ghost. And she said that between 3 and 4 in the morning, and this is the approximate time of the murders, that she was often visited by the ghost of the Sultan. Now, he's appearing as a full-body apparition. He's got the turban on his head, and she'd awaken in the middle of the night, sensing someone looking at her. She'd open her eyes, and there he is staring down at her. And the minute she screams, I know, it's crazy, huh? The minute she screams or turns on a light, he disappears. So he's very elusive during his life, and equally so in the afterlife. At the time that she did that interview, she was living in the top 2 stories of the mansion, and the other 2 stories were used as apartments. So different interviews were done through the years with people who lived in these apartments, and it seems that they were also reporting activity between the 3 and 4 time range when the murders presumably happened. One couple worked as a bartender, and they were coming home late at night, and they reported that sometimes when they would be in the stairwell, they would actually see pieces of a torso tangled up in the chandelier, hanging in the stairwell. Other people complained that they were being awakened in the middle of the night by the sounds of thumps on the floor. Maybe body parts.
Now, during your when you do this tour, are they allowed to go through this palace?
No, we are not allowed. We're not allowed by the city to go into the homes. We have been fortunate enough, in 21 years, a few times that the owner would be there, and he's actually let us in. He's let a couple of groups in. But even if the owners would allow it on a regular basis, the city wouldn't. But he has allowed tour groups to come in and walk through the house. The current owner is actually the son of the lady who did the interview many years ago with the newspaper. But he's let us in there. It's actually quite a view from that 4-story balcony looking down Orleans Avenue at the back of the cathedral. But, now he's a little bit skeptic, but he does say that his wife has seen some glimpses of the Sultan too. Some people have only seen like the tail end of his robe kind of whipping around a corner.
Wow.
And a lot of people believe that the Sultan can't find rest until the murders are solved. But, I seriously doubt the murders are going to be solved anytime soon.
Now, the next one, the LaLaurie.
Yes, LaLaurie, yes.
The LaLaurie Mansion. I started reading, I read some of this story on this. I can't believe it. It is, go ahead and tell them, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, it has been referred to as the blemish of our history. It really has been, and it is, of course, the crown jewel of our ghost tour. Because people, they want to go to this location, particularly since it was used. I think it was the third season of American Horror Story that they used that as the storyline, was about Madame LaLaurie, and of course they fictionalized it, which is great. But the true story about it's pretty horrific.
It is,
and it's a large gray mansion, 3-story mansion on the corner of the 1100 block of Royal Street, on the corner of Royal Street and Governor Nicholas Street. And in the 1830s, it was the home of Delphine LaLaurie and her husband, Dr. Louis LaLaurie, or he would have been called back then Louis LaLaurie. They were French. And he was a surgeon. She, of course, was a socialite. Now, he was her third husband. She had been married a couple of times before, but they had 2 children together. They had a very nice life. And she was best known and loved in the city by her peers for being the socialite. They threw cocktail parties quite frequently, once a week. And when we're talking about a cocktail party in the 1830s with a very wealthy elite Creole aristocrats in New Orleans, we're talking, not just food and beverage and socializing, we're talking all the upper echelon coming to these parties. She's friends with all the judges. She's friends with all the politicians. Anybody who's anybody is rubbing elbows with Delphine. And of course they have an orchestra playing, and they've got the finest food being served, and very, very well-behaved servants as well. Now, Madame LaLaurie made the headlines of the newspaper in the early part of 1833. She had a habit of being very fashionably late for her parties. She would throw these big soirees, and while people were gathering and entering the party and being led in by her servants, she's up in her boudoir still preparing so that she could make the grand entrance of coming down the stairs looking perfect. So she's upstairs. She has a party going on downstairs, and she's being attended to by a little girl by the name of Leah. Leah's a slave girl. She's 12 years old. And she's combing Madame LaLaurie's hair. Madame LaLaurie had long black hair, and she would have it arranged all on top of her head. Back then the women would have these big hairdos, and I'm sure it took hours of combing and twisting and pinning and all sorts of manipulation to pull off this perfect hairdo for Madame LaLaurie. But poor little Leah is combing her hair, and she accidentally pulls a tangle. Now she pulls Madame LaLaurie's hair, and in a fit of rage, this woman grabs a bullwhip from under her dressing table, and she proceeds to beat this little girl over and over again. Now imagine, put yourself in that child's position. What are you going to do? I mean, you're screaming, you're hysterical. She darts out the room, of course. So the woman's screaming at her in French, and she's chasing her with this bullwhip, and Leah's hysterical. She's screaming, she darts out. She runs into this room, she runs into that room. Eventually, she runs out onto this small balcony. It's a little rounded off balcony that kind of extends over the courtyard. Now, this is a 12-year-old kid. A woman's trying to beat her with a whip. She's not thinking. In this state of hysteria, Leah climbs up onto the balcony railing, where she lost her footing, and she fell to the courtyard below. She died instantly. Now, neighbors heard a child scream. They walk outside onto their balconies. They see Madame LaLaurie, and there she is, standing on the balcony with a whip in her hand, raised. So needless to say, she was brought before the courts for this child's death, but because she is who she is, and she knows everybody, she's given a mere slap on the wrist. She's given a $300 fine. Now, yes, $300 is a lot of money back in 1833, but you have to understand, again, we're talking about this huge stone mansion that for these people, this was nothing. It's just a slap on the wrist, and the incident was kind of swept aside. Now, there had been another incident where the LaLauries were brought before the courts because someone had reported them beating and starving their slaves. And there were several slaves that were found in the home that had been beaten. They were scarred up, they were emaciated, and they actually took them from the LaLauries, took them away. Courts took them away, brought them back to the slave auction, and somebody else comes along and purchases them. It was Madame LaLaurie's cousin, and he brought them right back. Can you imagine the emotions, the horror of those people of being brought back into that house? So you've got all of this energy going on in this place. And then finally, it all hits its head. on April 10th of 1834, when a fire broke out in the LaLaurie home. Now again, there's a party going on as usual. People laughing, they're talking, they're eating, they're drinking, orchestra playing, Madame LaLaurie's getting prepared, Dr. Louis off wherever he was, and suddenly some of the party guests are aware of people outside on the side of Governor Nichols, on the side of the courtyard and where the carriageway is, screaming, "Fire, run." So needless to say, people start leaving the home, they're going around to the side of the house, and there's black smoke billowing out of the back of the property where the kitchen is, which was over the carriageway. These people start piling up right across from the courtyard. They're watching this. They watch the fire brigade come down to take care of the fire. They go in, they extinguish the fire, and then they come down with the bodies of 2 slaves who were chained to the stove in the kitchen, one of whom is a 70-year-old woman. Now, this woman tells them, she's still alive, she tells them, "Call the police. I started that fire." Now, this woman risked her life and started a fire to bring attention to what was going on inside that house. She directed the police and the fire brigade to a small attic crawl space above what's now apartments. It was actually slave quarters at the time. Now, they get up there and the door's bolted and locked on the outside. They can hear people screaming on the inside. It took a battering ram and several men to knock down this big oak door. And when that door flew open, seasoned firemen and police are falling to their knees vomiting from the stench of death inside this room. They're slaves chained to the walls. These people are not only emaciated and scarred, but some of them, many of them, look like they were the victims of some sort of crude medical experiments. Arms are cut off, legs are cut off, eyes are sewn shut, some of them had their tongues cut out, pieces of flesh just kind of mutilated. We don't really know the motive here. We don't know if they were purposely trying to just torture them. But part of me wants to believe that perhaps Dr. Louis, because in the 1830s, surgery was very new. Amputation was very new. It could very well be that maybe if a slave got injured, he was experimenting with some of these procedures. I don't know. We don't really know what the motive was, but we do know that they were infamous for abusing slaves. But nonetheless, the survivors as well as the dead, they're being taken out through the courtyard. Well, by now, there's a mob scene out there. You've got your courtyard here. You've got across the street, standing in the other driveway, you've got a mob of people, partygoers, neighbors, and they're out there and they're watching these atrocities. They're furious. People had no idea the activities that were going on inside this home. No one knew what kind of monsters these people were. So this crowd, they're getting a little riled up. They want to go in there and find the LaLauries and take them down to the Place Arms and lynch them. No questions asked. They're going to kill them. Well, the police go through the house and they come out and they say they're gone. They're not here. And this baffles a lot of people because they go, where did they go?
Absolutely, yeah. Where'd they go?
Yeah, well, and you'll see things on the internet. It's funny because people like to, try to add their own little touch to things. And I've seen things and I've heard other people say, oh, they went through the tunnel underground. Well, this is New Orleans. We're below sea level. We don't have any tunnels below ground. And if we did, we do actually. It's called a sewer and you would drown. So that's not very likely. The most likely thing is the thing you would least expect. See, all this activity is going on the side of the house on Governor Nicholas Street. A lot of people think they just walked right out the front door. They could have walked right out the front door on Royal Street. Nobody would have seen them. They're all focusing their attention on everything else. Walked right out, probably circled the block. And the most logical thing was that they wound up at the riverbank, a block and a half away. Because in 1834, if you had a home like that, and you had that kind of wealth, you're a surgeon, you probably had a ship, or you could easily get one. And it's most likely that they would have jumped ship, gone upriver, crossed Lake Pontchartrain, and then escaped through the North Shore. There's actually documentation that shows that the LaLauries and their 2 children were on a ship leaving Paris several weeks later. Leaving for Paris, leaving New York, going back to Paris several weeks later. Also, a lot of speculation as to what happened to them after that, because they kind of just vanished. I've even heard some people say she's buried in St. Louis Cemetery. I think it's very highly unlikely that anyone would have brought her back here once she left. I do believe that she probably did go back to Paris. There's actually supposedly documentation somewhere indicating that she was killed, in all things, a boar hunting accident. So now, you've got this big, huge mansion. You've got all of this stuff that just happened. Needless to say, as early as the following day, people are starting to call this place the haunted house. People swore they still heard screams coming from the back of the house. Most people wouldn't walk on the same side of the street as that house. Others avoided the block completely. The house actually remained vacant for about 40 years. So fast forward 40 years, we've got the early 1900s. This is an area, a time when the French Quarter was used for low-income housing for Italian immigrants. The place was a tenement. It fell into ruin. These people start giving reports to the New Orleans Bee. That was the newspaper at the time. They're giving interviews. This became, kind of a novelty at Halloween time. The newspaper would go out and they'd interview people in these homes that were allegedly haunted. And these people are telling them, yeah, we see some guy walking the galleries and the balconies out here, and he's covered in chains of blood. Others said they would hear a young girl screaming in the courtyard late at night. There was one very interesting interview that was done with a mother. She was the mother of twin infants. And she said that she got up one night to check on her children, and as she crossed the hallway, she sees a woman on the corner of her eye standing on the landing at the top of the stairs. She's tossing the baby down the stairs. Now this woman freaks out, screams hysterically, runs into her children's room, and they're fine. They're both there. But on that following night, she goes in to check on those kids, and she sees that same woman hovered over one of those cribs, and she's leaning in over that baby. Well, the mother, of course, screams. She rushes towards her. The woman vanishes, but a sock was shoved in that baby's mouth.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. The baby was okay. The baby was fine. But needless to say, one by one, these people start moving out. Now, somebody tried to open a furniture store there at one time. That didn't last. That person put furniture in 3 times and would lock up the place, leave, and come back in, and it would be vandalized. You'd find dead chickens, dead animals in the courtyard, blood everywhere, feces everywhere. Happened 3 times. And after that, he was like, yep, I'm out of here. Somebody even got really cute and tried to open up the haunted saloon, and that didn't last. So the house remained vacant for quite a while after that, until like the 1950s, when some investors went in and started renovating the property. But when they got back to renovate what's now the apartments, the slave quarters, they noticed some loose floorboards. So, of course, they were going to replace those. They start pulling them up, and they find the remains of all these people who had been shoved under a trap door below the floorboards of the house.
Were they shoved? Were they under there? Were they shoved alive, or after they had mutilated them, did they put them under there?
No, they were alive. They were alive, and they were not mutilated. And the thing is, we believe that when the following day came along and they claimed that they were still hearing people scream, they were hearing those people under the floors. And they're going, oh, they're ghosts. Well, no, they were screaming help. And you see, the thing is, a lot of those slaves, they would go through slaves like crazy. So a lot of people, from the way the story was told way back closer to when this happened, was that they thought they heard spirits talking in a spirit language. And what they were hearing was the African language. And these people screaming and crying to be let out of there. And everybody ignored them because they thought they were ghosts. It's very sad, horribly tragic. A lot of tragic energy around there.
How many square feet was that mansion?
Oh gosh, it's big. I don't know the exact square footage. I've been in the mansion. It's beautiful. I would say it's got to be about 7,000 square feet, and that's the main part of the house. You've got the main part of the house, and that's what you see from the corner there. And the way the house is built, it's typical Spanish architecture of the time. And so you come off that main part of that big, huge house, and in the back you've got the courtyard. Because they didn't have front yards, they had courtyards, which were called patios. And then you had your slave quarters here, and then across the back you had your carriageway with your kitchen on top. Now, of course, all of this is all apartments now in the back.
Oh, what a shame. Now you sent some pictures, some ghost pictures that your people on your tour, I guess, took pictures and they sent them to you. Well, the first one I'm showing them, well, they're mostly all like a fog in front of the mansion, and this one is the one that's framed in white. I guess it could have been a instant picture from an instant camera, but I'm showing that one.
Okay, yeah, all of them have the ectoplasm. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and I'm sure a lot of the people who view your show are very familiar with spirit photography. I'm sure a lot of them are into the paranormal investigations, and they all know, of course, that spirit does manifest in several different ways on photographs. And I'm always a little skeptical of orbs. It's easy to get orbs, but most of the things we get at the LaLaurie Mansion is heavy ectoplasm. Mm-hmm. And the ectoplasm is what looks kind of like smoke or fog that appears in the photograph. And what's interesting in a lot of these is some people go, well, maybe somebody was smoking there. Maybe so. But you'll notice on some of them that the fog's like up at the top of the building.
Yeah.
It's not down here where the people are. So it would be very, very difficult to get this. And the thing is, a lot of those photographs were taken very early on when we first started doing the tour. So you got to realize these are taken with film. They're not digital. And also it's before people could really make changes and things in Photoshop. So I find them very interesting. But we've even had a few that look like they're trying to form some sort of apparition of sorts. You'll sometimes see a little bit of a face coming out in that fog. But we've got tons and tons of photographs on the side of that house with ectoplasm on it. And it seems all the energy is back in the slave quarters. Because I've been in the house. There's no energy in the house. It's the back part. I actually know someone who grew up in the house. She lived there with her father. Her parents were divorced, and her brothers lived there with the father on weekends and summers. And she gave us a very interesting story. We had interviewed her at some point, and she said she remembered being a little girl and coming down Royal Street from having dinner around the Rockland Esplanade. She's coming down the street with her father, and she's holding her father's hand. And they look up the building, and she says, "Daddy, what is that little girl doing up on top of the building?" And he just stops. He says, "What little girl?" She says, "There's a little girl sitting on the top of the building, and she's dangling her feet over it."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah.
Kids don't lie. They're like, wait, there's a kid up there. Why? And just amazing things that people have reported. One family said that they actually saw a piano move across the room. Because some of the way they did the apartments was that you would have, a door that would connect two apartments together, and they kind of locked them off. So they had one of them put a coffee table there, and they said they saw it just levitate right through the house. But if you go into the main part of the house, you don't feel anything.
So there's apartments in the back, but what about the rest of there's 3 levels. What about the other levels? Are they all apartments?
Well, yeah, all 3 levels are apartment, and that's above that is where the little attic crawl space was, where all of this activity took place, where all the torturing took place. This is the area where the bodies were under the floorboards. Now, what's really interesting is that when we're telling these stories, we can't go inside the house, of course, but usually I always try to get in the best spot. And the best spot, of course, is directly across from the courtyard. And we've been doing the tour for about 21 years. And over the last 21 years that we've been doing these tours, we've had about 100 people faint, all right there, directly across from the courtyard. And it took me a while to figure out, why is this going on here? Why is this transferring over here? And, after a while I started, it was like, residual haunting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You think about the emotions that mob scene had. Think about those people standing there watching the incident that occurred that night. The horror, the anger, the shock. No doubt people getting sick. No doubt people fainting. And if you've got somebody that stands there and they're sensitive to psychic energy, they're going to feel something. They're going to, experience something that somebody maybe felt on that night. And sometimes that something is they pass out.
You know, when the fire occurred on that building, did it burn to the ground, or were they able to save most of it?
They saved most of it. Most of the damage was in the back, where the carriageway was, the kitchen, but it was mostly like on the balcony. If you were there today, the little balcony where Leah fell, it's a different balcony that's been replaced, but a lot of the damage was done to the back of the building where the slave quarters were.
Okay, well, with that fire then, and those, when do you think she put those slaves under the floorboards? Were they there when the fire occurred?
I would imagine they would have been. They would have had to have already been there if they found remains of these people many years later.
I wonder if that fire killed them.
Could be.
Oh my God.
Smoke inhalation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But I mean, you've got the carriageway was here with the fire here, and these apartments were here. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess some of them still could have been alive.
So,
I don't know. It's horrific any way you look at it. It really is. It's absolutely horrific. Because if the fire didn't kill them, then they would have suffocated to death. I mean, if you have have you ever been to New Orleans, Norene?
Oh, God, yes. That's my favorite place.
Have you ever been here in August? I mean, it gets hot here. A lot of people don't realize it gets deathly hot when you're not trapped under the floorboard of the house. I mean, it really does. It's like a sauna. And it's just, you can't even fathom people being crammed underneath the floor. It's like, it's horrific. It really is. It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah, we went in June. We went in June, and it was hot in June.
It's hot.
It was hot in June.
But it's
muggy.
It's not as hot as it gets.
It's not. It's the muggy. It's so muggy.
It gets worse. Trust me.
Oh my God!
By the end of September, you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm pretty done with this. I'm ready for this to be over.
I'm telling you, New Orleans is one of the most haunted locations I have ever been to. Ever.
It really is. When you think about it, because people want to know, well, why is it? And I mean, the French Quarter is only, the original city of New Orleans is what we call the French Quarter today. It's 10 by 12 blocks. And you had the first 200 years of death upon death upon death. I mean, aside from gruesome murders like we just spoke of, we had 200 years of yellow fever epidemics that killed people by the thousands each year. I mean, people were dying literally by the thousands of a disease that was very much like the European plagues. European doctors had no knowledge of tropical medicine at the time. So they were just wiping out entire families annually. We also had two major fires, one in 1788 and one in 1794, both of which burned down over 50% of French Quarter. And what's very odd about those is that they happened back to back. One happened at 617 Charters. The other one happened at 616 Royal. Both properties backed up to one another. Very strange.
Wow.
So, but yeah, there's a lot of hauntings there, and of course, I think, in my opinion, I think a lot of the spiritual activity that we have here, may be because of what was going on at the time with all the voodoo coming in, because the African traditions, I mean, they revolve around communicating with spirits. I mean, they've got that portal open all the time. So I think a lot of that kind of energized it.
So let's talk about, I want you to talk about Marie Laveau. You're Louisiana. Now, I had asked you this question about voodoo, and you said, oh, yes, Louisiana voodoo is completely different. So would you tell the viewers about it?
It is. And first, we're getting off of the subject of Delphine LaLaurie and going into Marie Laveau. I do want to tell people that, if you saw American Horror, which I love that show very, very much, but they didn't know each other. That was fiction, and it was beautiful fiction, but they really didn't know each other. Actually, Marie Laveau didn't become the Queen of Voodoo until the 1840s, about 10 years after Delphine had left. But voodoo is actually a religion. It stems from the Dahomey region of Africa, which is now Benin, and everywhere voodoo went throughout the Caribbean, it took on indigenous religions of the tribes that were there. So African voodoo is different from Haitian voodoo, which is different from New Orleans voodoo. Now, the voodoo that we have here in New Orleans went from Africa to Haiti to here. Now, a lot of people also don't realize that when voodoo came here, it was 1803. We were already American, and we had already had people living here since 1718. and they had brought in slaves from the Congo region of Africa. So you got a different language, different names for different things, but basically the same religion. So the religion was pretty much here, for almost 100 years before voodoo practitioners got here. And the Congo people had really, really bonded with the Native Americans. We had the Choctaw Indians. And if any of you have ever been to New Orleans and saw the Mardi Gras Indians, that's where this comes from. It's about the reunion of the Africans and the Choctaws blending together. And that's exactly what they did with their religions and their medicinals. It was the Native Americans that taught the voodoo practitioners and the slaves about the roots and the herbs and plants and so forth for the medicinals that they used. And when the voodoo practitioners got here, what made voodoo in New Orleans so different from anywhere else in the United States is that it was not brought by slaves. The voodoo practitioners from Haiti were actually wealthy Haitian French-speaking immigrants that migrated over here from Haiti. There was a big slave uprising in Haiti, and a lot of these people were expelled. Basically, what they did was, from what I've read in the history books, the books I read, said that basically the pure African blood got rid of all the people who had a little bit of European blood. And I'm like, all right, y'all can just go. Y'all speak French, go somewhere else. Where's it gonna go? I mean, New Orleans was a French-speaking city. So these people came here as free people. They didn't come over here as slaves. They're wealthy, they own their own plantations, they own their own businesses, they own their own slaves. So they got no reason to believe that they can't practice their religion freely. Some of the first voodoo rituals were held a block and a half away from the St. Louis Cathedral. Now imagine, they're in there doing mass and they hear these drums. Now, I've read a lot of things and I've heard a lot of people go, this really freaked them out and they wanted to get rid of it. It's like they didn't freak, they knew what that was. They've been listening to it. See, when the Congo people came, when the slaves were here, the French in the French Quarter said, okay, y'all can go over there outside of the city limits in what was called Congo Square, is now Armstrong Park, and they said you can practice your religious ceremonies there. So this is where the Choctaws and the Congo people practiced their religious ceremonies. It wasn't so much they hadn't heard these drums before and didn't understand what they were, it was that they couldn't control it. It took until 1811 when the Catholic Church finally got the city to pass an ordinance saying no other religion but Catholicism could be practiced in the city limits. See, you couldn't say, you voodoo practitioners who are paying taxes can't practice your religion. So what they did was they said, nobody can. You Americans, y'all can't be here either because you're Protestants. Okay, you can only be Catholic. So they only allowed Catholic Church in the French Quarter. And the voodoo practitioners were basically at that point forced by law to do their religious ceremonies in Congo Square. Well, suffice to say, they started blending their traditions with the Congo people, slaves. They start blending their traditions with the Choctaw. So here you have the birth of New Orleans voodoo. And it's unique to this area because of the blending with the Congo religion of Palo Mayombe and with the Choctaw traditions. Now, if you fast forward to the 1840s, when a young hairdresser by the name of Marie Laveau comes along, and now Marie Laveau, she was raised Catholic. She was the daughter of a French plantation owner. Her parents were free people of color. Charles Laveau was a plantation owner. So Marie Laveau was brought up as a very wealthy heir to this family. She was educated. She was trained to be a hairdresser. She spoke several languages. Now, back then, hairdressers and barbers were very related to nurses. They didn't officially have nurses back then. So during yellow fever epidemics, somebody like Marie Laveau would volunteer as a nurse. They had very few nurses. Hairdressers and barbers. I can remember, I don't know how old you are, but I'm old enough to remember, I can remember going to the beauty salon with my mother in the early 60s, and they were still able to remove warts and moles in the beauty salon.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, honey, you could get a 2 for deal. Cut that hair and cut that mole off.
Oh no! Oh my God, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Back in the 1800s, if you went to the barber shop, they had leeches there. They would put the leeches on you to bleed you. They actually believe, we have a pharmacy museum here, they actually believed that if that running fever meant you had too much blood, and they would put leeches on you to bleed you.
Oh, you know what? I think that was a New Orleans thing. I don't think you could do that in California.
Maybe not. But this is what people did, you know? So Marie Laveau, you know, she wanted to help during these yellow fever epidemics. She didn't go seeking out voodoo the religion. What she did was she went seeking herbal medicine. You know, because you've got to realize, you know, 1840s, they're still not really, they haven't figured out what yellow fever is. That didn't come along until 1900. You're not even doing the full amputations yet. They have no anesthesia, no analgesics. They got nothing. So now Marie Laveau sees these other people. She's seeing these free women of color, these slaves. They're not sick. They're not in pain. You know, what are they doing? Well, back then we had something called root doctors. The African, you know, the voodoo practitioners, many of the male practitioners, the priests were dealing with medicinals. And they would, you know, do roots, the herbs, they'd make teas, they'd make ointments, and they would sell these to the public. Now just imagine this. Put yourself back in the 1840s, you know, you got a bad headache, you know, you got a backache. Yeah, the doctors are not going to give you the time of day. You know, they've got a disease killing people off by the thousands. They don't want to hear about your headache. But you go to the root doctor, and he gets you to drink this tea, and it's a little bit of white willow bark. It's aspirin. And the pain goes away. Do you see where that's magic?
Mm-hmm.
To doctor there? That's magic.
Yeah.
So, you know, this really created a dual thinking. You know, people feared voodoo, but at the same time, you know, they liked the medicinals. Well, Marie Laveau, you know, she wants to learn some of these medicinals because she's like, you know, she wants to help. She's a very benevolent healer. And she goes to Sanite Dede, who was the first voodoo queen here, and she wants to study herbs. Well, you know, she starts learning the voodoo religion, and she just absolutely falls in love with it. Now, Marie Laveau is a devout Catholic. She goes to Mass every day of her life. But she notices there's some similarities in these religions. There's one God, the Creator, and there's many intercessors. Catholics have saints. Voodoo has laws. Very much like the Catholic saints, each has a specific purpose. Now, unlike the saints, they were never people. They were more like angels in that respect. But they all have a specific purpose, and they are intercessors in their lives. So what Marie Laveau does as she studies voodoo, she rises to the ranks of voodoo queen, which is basically a high priestess, and she starts incorporating candles and holy water into the voodoo rituals. She takes the law and she pairs them with the saints. This same thing, same energy. And basically what she did was she blended what was already the beginning of New Orleans voodoo, where it really kind of got topped off like a latte, you know. She puts her Catholicism in there. And that's what made it so different. And that's, you know, now of course today, you know, anywhere you go in the Caribbean or in Central South America, you're going to find these African religions already blended with Catholicism because that's what happened. You know, so each one is very, very unique to their own area. And our voodoo is very, very unique.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about these voodoo dolls, and when did all that all come about?
Well, now, it was actually Marie Laveau's daughter, Marie II. Marie II was actually Marie Glapion, because Marie Laveau got involved in what was called a plaçage arrangement with a Frenchman, and it was a contractual agreement because interracial marriage wasn't allowed back then. So in this contract, they were basically a couple by contract, and the children, of course, born of the union, took the father's name and had right of heirship. Well, Marie and Christophe had quite a few kids together. It's very questionable how many they had. We know she lost several to yellow fever. We know she had 3 daughters that lived to adulthood. The oldest was named after her, Marie, very common French name. And young Marie Glapion was very rebellious, and she went to court and changed her name to Marie Laveau, her mother's maiden name, so that she could just purposely become the next voodoo queen. And she became Marie II. Now, what she did to voodoo, she took it to another level, because back then, very wealthy fathers would give their daughters dowries. They give them property. Marie, too, was given a nice little chunk of property right there on Bourbon Street. Well, guess what she did? She opened up a voodoo shop. She sold roots, herbs, and spells.
Oh.
Now, this is the 1860s. Imagine a voodoo shop being opened up in the 1860s. So people are like, "Whoa, this is edgy. This is crazy." But what she started doing, people always want to know what's the difference between voodoo and hoodoo.
Yes, yeah. Tell us.
Voodoo's a religion. Hoodoo is the magic.
Oh.
That was a slang word that was used. You've been hoodooed. So it was a slang word that was used, and it is African, Haitian magic, Choctaw magic, all mixed together. And it's very heavy laden. And I realize 1860s, we're very much American by then. We got a lot of people here. We got French, we got Spanish, we got people from all over Europe coming in. It's very heavy laden with European sympathetic magic. So your voodoo dolls is actually European. You will not find dolls in Africa. You don't find dolls in Haiti. We expect to see them because Hollywood has portrayed that, but actually the voodoo doll is it's based after the European puppet, and the puppet was sympathetic magic. You would take something of that person and you attach it to the doll via a pin. You'd pin something to the doll, maybe a lock of hair, article of clothing, a picture, and you would do energetic work on this doll to transfer to that person. Now the original intent for this, of course, is for healing purposes. So, you stick a pin to the head, that might be to heal a headache, get rid of bad dreams, not necessarily to give somebody an aneurysm. Big difference. Pin to the heart, maybe to heal grief. But of course Hollywood took it to another level. And with the voodoo doll, it's basically something that you could do. In hoodoo and voodoo, they started doing what's called gree-grees. Okay, gree-gree is a charm. You could use a doll as a gree-gree, or you could do a bag, a gree-gree bag, very similar to a Native American medicine bag. And they do two things. They only do two things. They bring something to you, or they get rid of something. Very, very simple. You're either drawing something or you're repelling something. You might be repelling somebody else's negative energy, someone else's spell. You might be repelling negativity. You might be clearing obstacles. You're drawing. What are you drawing? Love, luck, money, prosperity, good health, protection. So these were the things that you used a gree-gree bag for, or a voodoo doll. If you had a loved one and you wanted that person to be protected, and they're kind of not wanting to carry a gree-gree bag, and they're kind of resistant, that you might do, grab a little bit of their hair and put it onto a voodoo doll and do protection on that doll to send that energy to that person.
But they used voodoo dolls, though, for curses on people.
In Hollywood, yes. Yes, they do. Any real practitioner knows better than to do something like that, because we also believe in karma. Generally, curses are going to come home to roost. And I've been a practitioner for over 20 years, and I've seen that a lot. Where people go and they try to do something like that, or they try to bind somebody with a love spell, and then they always have to come back and try it. This is why one of the most popular voodoo spells in New Orleans voodoo is the uncrossing spell. It's to undo what you've done and messed up on. And the thing is, in voodoo, especially if you're really following the religion. I mean, for a while they kind of were like, nah, we're not doing the religion. We're just going to do this stuff, and we're not going to fool with the law. But if you're really following that spiritual path, the spirits aren't going to let you do something negative like that. I mean, it just doesn't work. That's Hollywood. I always tell people on the voodoo tour, if you could stick pins in a doll and maim and kill people, I wouldn't be here right now, because I wouldn't have any ex-husbands. I'd be like this wealthy widow living somewhere in the Caribbean, sipping on a margarita or something. So it just simply doesn't work that way. You can't. Usually, if you put out that kind of negativity, what it does is it's gonna full circle. It's gonna come back at you.
I hope so.
You may not recognize it as your own stuff, and then wow, why did that happen to me? Well, you put it out there. That's why.
Now, what about her? Now, the Marie Laveau in the cemetery. Which one is that? The mother or the daughter?
That is the mother. Now, that is the Glapion family tomb. That's in St. Louis Cemetery, #1. We actually have a tour that goes there twice a day. And that is the mother. She was buried there. And I actually found evidence that when she passed away, people in the city of New Orleans petitioned the Catholic Church to have her sainted. Because she was a very benevolent person. She would take people into her home and treat them for medical problems, regardless of their race or ability to pay. She would go to prisons and minister to people on death row. She was a very benevolent person. And she also never abandoned her Catholic roots. She continued to go to Mass every day over 98 years. So she was really walking a very high spiritual path. So, people, until recently when they blocked off the cemeteries and they would guard there, now they won't let you do it. People, for years and years and years, people were going there and leaving offerings at her tomb and asking for favors. Even though there wasn't enough of what the Catholic Church needed to saint her, people still treated her as such. Now, Marie too, we know it's not Marie too, and I'll tell you why. Because Marie too, her siblings were very outraged because she took their mother's name in a religion and she profited from it, and they disagreed with that. They did not feel right about that. They felt that was very, very wrong. Now, by today's standards, we would go, wow, she was brilliant. She was a very enterprising businesswoman. But in the 1860s, they were like, no, that's not what this was intended to be. So when she died, her siblings refused to put her in that grave. She's buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in St. Louis Cemetery #2 where they buried slaves.
No.
She was disgraced. Oh yeah. It's sad because, like I said, the view of what her intent was back then. A lot of people viewed her as evil. When you hear the scary stories about Marie Laveau, they're talking about the daughter because people feared her.
Oh yeah. So now I always heard that the grave, Marie Laveau's grave, is that you don't take anything from there and be very careful that it's really haunted. What's with her gravesite there?
Well, with the gravesite, here's what happened. Like I said, during her life, she was very, very benevolent. But needless to say, after she passed away, people started going there, leaving offerings, praying to her like she's a saint. Well, needless to say, there starts the legends and the rumors of the ghost of Marie Laveau. Cab drivers would swear, because the interstate goes right over the top of the cemetery, and they would swear that they would see a voodoo ritual going on inside the cemetery. Mm-hmm. Some say that her ghost would leave the grave and walk down St. Anne Street to the house. Others believe that she turned into a crow and that she would fly over there. They're legends. They're legends because, especially in the voodoo tradition, we don't believe that, our loved ones are not hanging out in the cemetery. It would make more sense for her to be somewhere else. But there's tons of legends about it. And many, an old story came from the cemetery, cab drivers swearing that there was a voodoo ritual going on right by her gravesite. And wow. There she was, and she was dancing with a large snake. And
hey, by the way, you practice voodoo, right? And you do rituals? You used to do rituals. Are you still doing those?
I don't, over the last few years, once my godparents passed away, because, voodoo is structured, you go in through godparents. You have a godmother, godfather, and it's an oral tradition. You learn the religion, word of mouth, and you become like a voodoo family. And you have, instead of having a church, you have a house, and that's that family, and that's godparents, godchildren. And once they passed away, after Katrina, I didn't really get involved in another voodoo house. And a few years ago, I actually started getting involved in the Santeria house because I just like those people, and I connected very well with those people. But so I am now in the Santeria tradition, which is very similar. It's all very similar. But back in the day, we used to do a lot of public rituals. My godfather was the owner and curator of the New Orleans Historic Voodoo Museum, and he did a lot of public rituals. And yes, I used to be a snake dancer. That was my job in the voodoo ritual. I did the snake dancing. So.
Now I have you sent me a picture of you dancing with a snake. Yeah,
that's what I did. That was my job. Yeah, in the ritual.
Oh, Okay.
And a lot of people, again, it looks so scary, and it's such a beautiful thing though, because the snake represents the Laveau, Damballa. If you've ever read the book or saw the movie Serpent and the Rainbow, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that saw the movie or read the book Serpent and the Rainbow. And the serpent is the great healer of the pantheon. And it's Damballa, and the dance with the snake was usually done in a healing ritual. And it was very symbolic because the snake and the dancer become one, and it represents God and man becoming one. And the union of heaven and earth. So it's basically the blending of the physical and the spirit world. So, we did a lot of healing rituals, and in fact, I did a lot of them on quite a few on Travel Channel, and one of them I did one of the last rituals that I did. One of the producers that was doing a show wanted a private ritual done for her mother who was in chemo, and she knew her mother was going to pass, but she wanted to help her mother get better. She didn't want her to be quite so sick, and we did a healing ritual for her, and Spirit took the snake. The snake died in my arms.
No.
And I got better.
Oh, no way.
Oh, it was horrible. I literally left the ritual. I mean, I put him in his carrier, and I'm like, I'm on my way to the vet. I'm jumping in my car going, I got to get to the vet now, and he passed. But I've seen some crazy things in some of these rituals. We had another ritual again on Travel. It always happened on Travel Channel. I don't know why, but there was another ritual where I got the snake up, and it's like, oh wow, he peed on me when I was like wet coming. It's like, what in the world's going on? And it's like, you got to keep smiling. Cameras are on. Okay, and then I realized the snake's opening its mouth, and water is pouring out. Water is pouring out the snake's mouth, and I'm like, oh wow, this is weird. You got to keep doing what you're doing. And afterwards I asked some of the elders, like, what in the world do you think was going on with that, and they said that there was a lot of negativity in the room, and the snake was pulling the negativity in.
No, I never heard that before. Wow.
Yeah, it's it's a very strange thing. Very strange things I have seen between the hot stuff and the other stuff, the ritual stuff.
All right, so the next one, let's have you talk about the Ursuline Convent.
Ursuline Convent, yes. What a great place.
And that's has something to do with the casket girls and vampires, right?
Yes, one of my favorite stories, yes. Actually, we have a very rich folklore here. We have stories about werewolves, more out in the bayou and all, but New Orleans is very famous not only for its ghosts, but for its vampires. And many vampire writers, particularly Anne Rice, used New Orleans as a backdrop for their vampire stories, and it's no coincidence. It really isn't. Because we were settled so early, I mean, we were one of the older cities, the Ursuline Convent was built in the early 1720s, and it's the oldest building in the Mississippi Valley. The Ursuline nuns were the first women brought here from France, and they were brought over as nurses. Back then, the only nurses were nuns, and they were brought in to take care of yellow fever victims. And the Ursuline Convent was there, and you had the Ursuline Convent, and you had our settlers. Well, our original settlers were prisoners led out of the Bastilles. These were not the most elite people out of France. And, eventually they had to send brides for these people. They had to, try to populate the area. So they sent over a ship full of young women, and, they're not going to send wealthy Parisian women. They don't want to come here to the swamp. They actually, some businessmen conned some of the poor farmers out in the poor areas of France. France was a very poor country at the time, very overpopulated. And they basically conned them into sending their daughters to the New World. And these girls were so poor. They had nothing. And the King of France said, well, they have to have something. So he gave them these chests that looked like coffins. And that was basically their dowries. It was like a hoe chest. And, you might give them a tablecloth or, just little things that they're going to need to set up housekeeping when they get married. And that's what the coffins were, or caskets were supposed to be anyway. So, the way folklore happens, a lot of people don't understand what folklore happens. In France in the 1700s, this is at the height of the vampire hunts of the Inquisition. Vampire hunts went on for hundreds of years all across Eastern and Western Europe. And smack in the middle of this, in the early 1700s, this is where New Orleans was just starting to be colonized. So now imagine, our original settlers are coming from a country and a culture where, you don't just talk about vampires. They had vampire hunters. They're going out, they're digging up graves, they're cutting off heads, they're sticking stakes in hearts. This was real. This is a part of the history. So they come here, they've got them, you got Indians trying to kill them, and you got Ursuline nuns. So now imagine what these guys think. They see a ship coming into their port, young women escorted into a Catholic convent, followed by deckhands carrying what looks like coffins to them. See, talk of vampires came on very, very early in New Orleans. What's in there? Must be vampires. So, of course, the women would get trained, usually to be nurses, married off to these settlers. Well, caskets never come back out. Those boxes stayed up in there. So, many years later, it has become part of our folklore that the original caskets to the casket girls are stored in the attic of the convent, and that the vampires still reside there. Now, vampires in a Catholic convent, kind of a novel idea, right? But think about it. If one were a vampire, wouldn't it be a great place to hide? The place isn't even a convent anymore.
It is.
It was a convent for years. They rent it out sometimes for weddings. There's portions of it you can tour. And they've got the archives of the archdiocese in there.
No.
We don't know what's in that attic. We have no idea what's up there.
So that building is vacant now?
No, it's not vacant.
Oh.
There's a section in it that you can tour, and they'll do little tours through it. There's a section, from what I understand, I've talked to somebody who works there. There's like one whole floor of it that's like hermetically sealed. Some of the records there, you got to realize, back in the day when people had children at home, they didn't have birth certificates. Only thing you had was church records.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
You had baptismal records, you had marriage records, you had death records. That's it. But there was no birth certificates like you get in a hospital, back then. So all of these old genealogy records, who married who came here on the boats, all that's up in the Ursuline Convent. But I was told by somebody that they wear special suits to go in there and handle it because it's so old that it'll just disintegrate. So it's very, very specially handled there. And then they got that attic, they got the attic up there that's so questionable. But people in this end of the French Quarter for generations will swear that on certain nights, one of those top shutters is open, only to be shut the next day when the sun comes up. Now, I can sit here all night and blow holes in that theory.
Yeah.
I mean, you could too. We all could. We could blow holes in that theory all night. But at the end of the day, all we can do is really look at the facts. And the fact of the matter is that place is located directly across from the Beauregard Kai's house, which is the former home of General P.G.T. Beauregard. And he is the man that is responsible for ordering the shot that was fired at the start of the Civil War. And he also led one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, the Battle of Shiloh. And in 1978, they had a group of paranormal researchers spend several nights in the Beauregard Kai's house because they were having problems in there with paranormal activity. There were, bolts being thrown off of doors, pictures tilted in the morning, furniture moved around. So they bring in these paranormal researchers who spent several nights in the Beauregard Kai's house to do that study. And of course, while they're there, they hear the rumors about the convent. So on their last night, they don't want to leave. Two of them say, well, no, we're going to stay here. We want to see if there's shutters open. They were very curious. We ever hear the old cliche, curiosity killed the cat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We don't know what they found that night, let's put it that way. Because their bodies were found the next day on the steps of St. Mary's Chapel, face down, with 3.5-inch lacerations behind the left shoulder blade, directly over the aorta.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's weird because the police, now in the late 70s, early 80s, like I said, I grew up here. I lived here back then. I wasn't allowed in the French Quarter at that time. This was the murder capital of the U.S. They had several murders a week in the French Quarter. So, of course, now they got a couple of bodies on the steps of a church, adjacent to an old convent. They've got no clues, no witnesses, no suspects, and they got no blood. There's no blood in the bodies. The bodies are drained of blood. Not one drop anywhere on the concrete wall.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Now, the police, if it had happened 100 years before, they'd have blamed it on vampires, right? Because if you can't understand it, we can't explain it, we're going to make it supernatural, right?
Yeah.
In modern times, if you can't explain it, then, what are you going to do? Well, they blamed it on something supernatural, but it wasn't vampires that they blamed it on. They said, okay, it must have been some sort of occult murder. They figured the women were probably kidnapped from the area, taken somewhere else, ritualistically killed, and then dumped on the steps of the church. Case closed. Now, when I first started researching this particular thing, we actually had a guy who worked with NOPD. He was one of their investigators, and he did some security work for us. And I asked him to pull the records, and he did. He tried to anyway, but he said they were sealed by the courts. Couldn't get them. So, needless to say, none of that proved, nor does it disprove, whether there are or not vampires in the attic of the convent. So the story remains our folklore.
I love it. All right, how about the Louisiana werewolf? It's the loup-garou, is that how you pronounce it?
Loup-garou, yeah, loup-garou. I mean, again, the werewolf, I think the werewolf legends are older than the vampire legends. I mean, when I first started researching some of those things, there were actually cases in France where people were dying. There's one famous one in one little tiny village in France where this beast was killing people, and it turned out to be a very large wolf. So wolves were very real fears for people that lived out in rural Europe, especially in France. It's so overpopulated, and I think they started off, a lot of them, with you don't want your children wandering in the woods because they probably will get eaten by a wolf. And B, you had people who may have gotten, some people think it was had something to do with rabies. Maybe somebody's like living out in the woods, they get rabies and they start attacking people. A number of ways, but again, in my opinion, I think it comes back again to the Inquisition and the whole witchcraft thing. Just like during the Inquisition, the vampire hunts were actually based on the fact that they figured that if somebody could come back from the dead and feed upon the living, it had to be an act of devil and witchcraft. And that's how that got involved. But originally, during the witch hunts, it was believed that witches turned into wolves. They believed that witches rode wolves to their sabbats. They believed that witches could put a curse on something and make you a wolf. So that's where all of these legends came from. And again, needless to say, they came right over on that boat. I mean, you had a lot of wolves all over North America. So these legends continued. And of course, in French, it was the loup-garou. And, eventually through time, the Cajun French, it became the rougarou. They call them the rougarou. And it's a werewolf. It's basically a werewolf. And unlike the vampire, you're not doomed to be a rougarou forever. You can get out of it. There's like a get out of this affliction clause with the werewolf. Because if the rougarou attacks someone else, they transfer the curse to them. If the rougarou stares into your eyes and you see the red of their eyes, they can transfer the curse to you there. Or if the rougarou is injured or killed, they revert back to being human. So there's countless stories out in the bayous about the rougarou turning into wolves on the full moon. But is it a full moon tonight? I think it's a full moon tonight.
Oh, there is? Oh, awesome. On the 13th. Awesome. Too bad it wasn't Friday. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, on the 13th, that is today.
Yeah, it's the 13th today. Yeah, I like the 13th.
Perfect.
No, I've always wanted to know, the French came to Louisiana, and how did they become Cajuns? How did they get that name Cajun? Because it's not really, is it real French that they speak?
Yes. It is real French. Because you have to realize, Louisiana back then, in the early days, Louisiana went from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Canada. It was this whole big, it later on became subdivided up into many different states, but the original Louisiana Purchase went all the way up to Canada, and the Mississippi River goes all the way up to Canada. And basically, they had been doing a lot of fur trade up in Canada before Louisiana was even founded. And they would come down that Mississippi River. The fur traders would come down the Mississippi River, and what became so appealing, the reason they first settled New Orleans was because of the bend in the river. It was higher up ground. It was right there on the Mississippi River. They could have their little trading post there, stop for provisions, have a little city there, and then go right out. A couple hours later, you're out into the Gulf of Mexico, which leads into the ocean back to France. So this was all about the fur trade in the very, very beginning. So you had a lot of fur trappers up in Canada, and again, we always wound up with exiled people. I mean, first it was people out of the Bastilles. They got kicked out of France. And then the poor Haitians, they got kicked out and they came here. And the Cajuns, it was no different. They were called Acadian French. Acadian Canada. And when Canada was taken over by the British, some of those, especially in Nova Scotia, they expelled those Acadian French. And they're like, get out, you gotta leave. So where did they come? They came to Louisiana. And, all of these people, they live in coastal towns. I mean, Nova Scotia is a coastal area. These people were all fishermen. They lived off of the sea. So they all came and they settled down in the bayous and the coastal marshes and everything of Louisiana. And they continued to live the way they had been living for years. Well, even though we were French, we were ruled by Spain for 40 years. Long history with France and Spain, and the connection there. But actually, the King of Spain at the time, King Charles, was actually of the Bourbon family, which was the French kings as well, the French royalty. So, but we were ruled, the state was ruled by the Spanish, and in Spanish, they couldn't say Acadian. They called them Cajun.
Oh, I love them. But they have their own. It seems like they have their own little language. How they say
they do, and it blends. You see that again. You got to understand. This is something I grew up here, and I just took my folklore class to the museum over in St. Bernard Parish. They got a Islenos Museum, which is some of the Spanish colonists who came here from the Canary Islands. And they call them Islenos. And there was a lot of mixture with the Islenos population that was brought in, that settled on the outskirts of New Orleans, mixing with the Cajuns. Because a lot of the Cajun music was actually influenced by the Islenos music. So there was, you had a lot of, again, blending of languages, blending of cultures. And so, the language became a little bit different.
Oh, the music. I absolutely love Cajun music. I love it.
Isn't it fabulous?
Oh, God. When we went to Mulots, oh my God. I wanted to get up and dance with those people.
You should have.
Oh, God.
You gotta do the two-step,
I know. I was debating. I didn't want to be embarrassed. And I thought, well, what if I got up and asked one of those guys to dance with me and teach me how to dance the way they do? Oh my God, I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm telling you guys, if you ever get a chance to go to Louisiana and to New Orleans, I did not want to come home. I did not want to come back to California. I absolutely loved it. Oh my God.
It's fabulous. It really is. It's August and September. It is hideously hot. But other than that, it is fabulous. But yeah, the Cajun culture is absolutely wonderful. The food, the language, the culture, the music, everything is just absolutely wonderful.
We took a tour. I think there were seven of the plantations that we went to.
Oh yeah, the River Road plantation.
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. I have to tell. Can I tell you guys this one story? Can I tell you this one story? When we went to the Myrtles, my sister had called for. They had said that in the description that there was a little restaurant at the Myrtles. And this was a while back. And so my sister called to make reservations so we could go have lunch first at the Myrtles, and then we would take the tour. So my sister called up, and a man answered the phone, and she said, "I'd like to make reservations for lunch. There's 4 of us." And I can't remember. I asked her. I said, "Well, did he talk back did he answer you or did he talk with you? And she said, well, I just gave him the information, and then I can't remember if he said thank you or goodbye, but it was a short conversation, and then it ended. So when we drove up to the mansion, to the Myrtles Plantation, the restaurant was closed. And so we went into the the little building that they have where they sell the, souvenirs and stuff.
Yeah.
And we went in there, and she said, I called to make reservations for lunch, and you're not open. And she said, well, we don't serve lunch. And she said, but I called and made a reservation. And she said, well, I have to tell you. She said, there is a man. He's a ghost that hangs out there, and there has been times where he'll go to the gate, to the entrance of the plantation, and he'll lock it, and he'll send people away and say, we're not open today.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so then we said, well, guess what? He made lunch reservations for us, and we were starving. We didn't have lunch. And
yes,
so
I never heard that one.
okay, well, I got another one to tell you at the Myrtles. Then I needed to use the restroom. And so I told my sister, I said, well, the restroom's over here. I'm going to go. It was by the restaurant. And I said, well, I'm going to go use the restroom. So I headed toward the restroom. And out of the restroom is a lady, is a black woman. She's dressed like, oh God, she had her head was all wrapped up, and she had that, and I saw her, and I said, oh my God, I said, they must have people, tour guides that dress up like, what was the girl that, how the slaves looked, with the aprons and all that, and I said, oh my God, I said, and then so I went in there. Oh, so I went in there. Okay, so when I started to go toward it, she was coming out, and I looked at her, and I almost talked to her. I was gonna talk to her, and I should have. And I just looked at her, and she glanced at me, and we just passed one another. I could kick myself for not talking to her.
Gosh.
I
know that feeling.
Oh my God, that was, and I was crazy. And then so when we went on the tour, I told them, I said, I saw one of your people. Was she a tour guide? And they said, no, they don't have anybody that's like that. So I saw a ghost that day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. Awesome. The Myrtles is very haunted. We went to 7 plantations, and we had an experience, a paranormal experience at every one of them. I should write a book. Anyway, it was fabulous. It was fabulous. Now, I just want to ask you one. Royce, honey, do you want to take questions for the viewers? We'll start taking questions. I do want to ask you something. I know you're writing a new book, and it's on seance experiments.
Yes, it's called Seance Experiments, and actually the book's written. I've gotten the final copy to just kind of peruse through. We've already got the book cover done, and it is going to be published very, very soon, hopefully before the month is up. And it's called Seance Experiments. I actually wrote it with another medium named Sid Patrick, and it is our experience in the seance room. And we call it Seance Experiments because, everybody's familiar with the old seance you see on TV, and they do them a lot on paranormal shows. And I found out in the last few years that the English seance is very, very different from what a lot of people's impression of a seance was. And I started getting involved in physical mediumship. When you go to a medium and they're giving you messages from your loved ones, and they're saying, okay, your mother's here, and blah, blah, that's what we call mental mediumship. In the seance room, we do physical mediumship. And this is, we call it experiments because it's always an experiment. It's an experiment for us, and it's an experiment for spirit, to see what we can get by putting those two energies together and trying to get something that is physical. And physical phenomena can be anything from a medium in a cabinet producing ectoplasm to table tipping to actually getting physical things being apported out of nowhere, coming from spirit. So we spent 2 years experimenting and traveling around. We went to Wales, we went to Ireland, we went to a lot of different places. And the book is about our journey into the world of physical mediumship.
Wow. And I had asked you if you would be willing to do a live seance on my show. And what's happening with that?
Okay, well, Sid, we're both really busy right now with Halloween. We want to wait till the book comes out, of course. I think that would be the best time to do it. And I think, like I said, we're like this close to having it like officially out. And it would have to be done in the seance room, of course, because, I mean, I couldn't do it here. The only thing I would really want to make, very clear with you and the viewers and everything, spirit doesn't work on demand. Anytime, even in medium, mental mediumship, we don't pick and choose who, if anyone, comes through at all. We always look at it as an experiment. We consider spirit to be limitless, so we don't project any kind of, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. And everything is always left up to spirit. And I'm going to put Sid in touch with you so that he can talk a little more. He's had a lot more training in the physical mediumship than I have. And, there's just a lot of things people have to understand is that we don't fake phenomena. We won't make something happen. If nothing happens, then, you know what, hey, spirit didn't want to cooperate. It just didn't happen. We will not fake anything. And, when we go into these things, it's all about spirit getting to know us and us getting to know them. And that's why we do it in this one particular room. There's actually a video out on YouTube called The Skull Experiment. And excellent video on physical mediumship. And it was done in Skull, England. And it was done by it was the same group of people meeting on the same day of the week, same time, consistently for 5 or 10 years. And a group of scientists went in and looked at what they were doing and scientifically proved that what they were doing was actually valid. And they had all kind of amazing things happen. But you got to realize it was the same group of people, same energy. You got to have that cohesiveness to where you really have that relationship with spirit, to where things start where you start basically taking your energy and spirit's energy and blending the two together. And that's where the physical manifestation comes from. So, Well,
I've done that before. I have done a live seance, and it was through Skype. And you have to be in a certain room to do a seance?
Well, if you want to get physical phenomena, if we're going to get a 200-pound table to move, it's got to be there where the 200-pound table is. We can't move there. So,
okay.
Wouldn't work. We can't move. We can't move that stuff somewhere else. We've got a cabinet there. It's kind of like everything's there. It's physical stuff that's there. And like I said, the table itself weighs 200 pounds.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, next year is fine too. Whenever your book comes out, let me know.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely want to do something positively. But like I said, we don't want to misportray it and go, okay, we're going to guarantee you're going to see this, because you can't.
No. I think the viewers all understand that. All right, so we have some questions for you.
Perfect, great.
Okay. I See Lies. Question: What was your snake's name?
Mojo.
Mojo?
Yeah.
Oh. And River. Question: Has she ever been taken over by a spirit?
Yes.
What happened?
Well, in the Voodoo tradition, it is, we use the word possession very differently than people do when they're talking about demon possessions. And in the realm of spiritualism with the seances and the trance mediumship, they call it overshadowing, where the spirit will actually overshadow the medium, or in the Voodoo ritual, they'll overshadow the dancer, and the spirit kind of just takes over your body. And in Voodoo rituals, it usually would happen. I would trance out when I would be working with a snake, and there was one time that I know that something else was taking over, and I'm really not sure who it was, but I started drinking rum, and I didn't get drunk. and started spinning a lot. So I'm really not sure who that was, but basically in voodoo, what happens is when you're dancing, sometimes the deities will take over, and they'll what's called the Laveau will ride you. And once you are ridden by a Laveau, once that spirit overshadows you or possesses you, it stays with you the rest of your life. You're connected to that spirit forever. Now, in the sense of the trance medium, when I've seen people's faces morph when the spirit overshadows them, or they start talking like that person. So a lot of manifestations can happen, but yes, it's an amazing phenomenon. It's a gift. I look at it as a gift, but it's not the same as somebody being possessed by something negative.
Okay. Next question from Chris Cruz. When is it a good time to come to New Orleans?
Anytime, depends on what you want. If you want a lot of activity, if you want a lot of stuff going on, Mardi Gras is usually in February, early March. That's a lot of revelry, a lot of partying, a lot of visuals, a lot of stuff to see, but also very crowded. Jazz Fest is a very popular time of year to come in end of April, beginning of May. In the spring, there's all kind of festivals, but Jazz Fest is a big music festival that we have. If you want to come when there's nobody here, come in December. It's cool. There's no people in town, and it's quiet. If you just want to see the city, but if you want to come, most people want to come when something's going on. And Halloween is second to Mardi Gras. It's a huge celebration here. You can go online and pretty much Google a New Orleans calendar, and it'll tell you when things are going on. Probably the least desirable time to come to New Orleans is, like I said, August, September. It's hot. It's literally like a sauna. So.
But that's also hurricane season, isn't it?
It is. Well, hurricane season actually starts June 1st.
Yeah.
September 1st. But if we're going to get something, it's going to be late August, early September usually is when we start getting the storms. So you got a lot of rain, a lot of humidity, and it's literally like a sauna. And in the French Quarter, it's all that old brick. So about 9 o'clock at night, the heat starts releasing from the brick, and it's like being in an oven.
Yeah.
So, hey, some people like that. If you like being in an oven, hot, sweaty, it's great. But most people find that August, September is the sticky months, are usually not the desirable times to be here. But fall and spring.
And the food is unbelievable.
The food's unbelievable.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, I gained weight. It was so good. It was unbelievable, the food.
Yes. Wonderful food we have here.
Okay, next question. Oh, Lisa Knox. She said, yes, she has been taken over as well by a spirit. And is it good or bad?
Well, it depends on your intent. I mean, whether I'm working with a ritual or in a spiritual misa with Santeria, or if I'm in the seance room or in a medium's cabinet trying to trance out, it really depends on everything's vibration. Okay, you have higher vibrational spirits, you got lower vibrational spirits. If you are going into a situation, the reason we drum and we dance and we're chanting and all these rituals, we're raising a vibration.
Oh.
You see, that's what it's all about. That's why when you ever go to church, people in church sing, they play an organ. The music, the dancing, laughing, any of these things, the chanting, the singing, all of these things raise your vibration. So when you're working at that higher vibration, you're going to attract higher vibrational spirits. If you're looking for the woo-woo and you want to go looking for the darker stuff, I mean, some people that get that, what I call the paranormal thrill ride, they want the boo factor. They want to get scared. You go looking for that, you'll find that. So is it good or bad? I don't know. How do you feel? I mean, if something's on you and it won't leave, and it's causing you to be sick and it's causing bad things to happen in your life, then you need to seek out the help of an appropriate person to get that lifted from you. But general rule of thumb, if you're vibrating at a higher rate, you're going to attract those higher vibrational spirits, and generally they're just there for a visit and then they leave.
Okay, another question. Nancy Soplavida, What is the one place that is so scary you wouldn't recommend to visit in New Orleans?
The one place that the one place that I would not recommend visiting, you can't get in it anymore. And that's because it's been, 11 years now. It has not been reopened since Katrina. And that was a State Palace Theater. I mean, I'm sure there's probably creepier places out there. But to me, that was the creepiest place I went to. It's an old theater, and it was the original MGM theater in the city. And it had become later a business college, a beauty college for a while. And then in their last heydays, the 80s and 90s, it was where they had raves. And a lot of people OD'd there. There were a lot of deaths there, a lot of bad energy there. And it was there that I saw a shadow thing. You know, and everybody's probably familiar with the shadow person.
Yes.
Nobody really knows what they are. Well, I saw one. And nothing bad happened, but it did creep me out. And there was a lot of weird energy there, and I picked up a lot of sick energy in there, where people had really gotten sick, people had ODs, and I wouldn't want to ever go in there again.
Wow. All right, another question. Tammy Morrison, how has life changed via voodoo since Hurricane Katrina?
How has life changed? Well, I mean, for me, a lot of the people that I was connected with in the voodoo community back then left and never came back. Some of them were older and they passed away while they were gone. Everything, not just voodoo, but everything kind of changed after Katrina. I haven't been in a ritual since Katrina. I didn't have any more drummers. A lot of those people left town. After Katrina, I think the entire dynamics energetically of New Orleans changed. And there was just a big shift. In my opinion, there's very little true New Orleans voodoo left in New Orleans anymore. It was about that time that people started really going back to the more pure Haitian form of voodoo. Of course, Haiti opened up, so you could start traveling to Haiti. So there was a big shift around that time for people to start going back to that more pure Haitian form of voodoo. And I kind of feel like the New Orleans voodoo's kind of died out. And it's because, we all got old.
All right, there's a question from Chris Cruz, but I don't understand her question. She says, was it scary? But what was scary, honey? Guessing the spirit over shading thing. I don't understand that question.
I understand.
Do you?
Yeah, I understand. Was it scary when the spirit overshadowed?
Okay.
No, it wasn't. Usually, in the context of being in trance medium, being in the medium's cabinet and going in trance, when the spirit overshadows, you don't know what's going on. You're kind of like not there; they take over. So you're there, but you're not there. If that makes sense. It's kind of like I've had situations where spirit overshadows me and I'm somewhere else. I got visions of what looked like either Central America or Mexico, and I'm looking at what looks like Mayan pyramids. And I saw jaguars, and people saw the jaguar overshadow my face. So, while that's going on, lots of times the medium is in a trance state. They don't remember anything lots of times. You come back and you kind of remember it, or you're told what happened.
All right, we have another question. Cat the Moon. Can tourists go to voodoo Santeria rituals?
You used to be able to, because there was a lot more public rituals. Again, the time of year, if you come around Halloween time, there's usually some public rituals going on. But in general, it's not like it used to be. It's just not like it used to be. It's a little more clandestine. And with Santeria especially, in New Orleans, you don't see a whole lot of that there. Now, if you go down to Miami, you'll see it a lot more. It's also a cultural thing.
Okay. Let's see. Lully Tubi. She wants to know, between voodoo and Santeria, besides the difference of French and Spanish influence. Between voodoo and Santeria, besides the difference of French and Spanish influence. Do you understand that? Okay.
What is the difference besides that? That's how I understand it. And if I answer this wrong, that person's welcome to ask it a different way. But I think what they're saying is, what is the difference other than what one was French, Haiti, and the other is mostly Spanish? The biggest difference in the religions is the parts of Africa that they come from. Voodoo comes from the Dahomey western coast of Africa, which is now Benin, and Santeria is actually stems from Yoruba in Nigeria. And it went, most of the people in those places wound up in, they got a lot of that on Yucatan, Central America, South America, and it blended in. Usually Santeria you're going to see coming from Cuba, because they've got other versions of it in the other Caribbean areas.
Mm-hmm.
Have different names. So, for instance, Umbanda in Brazil, but it's still the same thing. It's still from the Yoruba. But the Santeria specifically wound up in Cuba, and they called it Santeria, which literally means the worship of saints. So it was Yoruba mixed with the Catholic religion, and taking the saints and representing those Orisha. So it's very specific to Cuba.
All right, now Sue Ramsey's asking a question, and Sue, honey, I don't do shows with readings, but she's asking, would you be willing to do a show with readings? But do you do readings for people?
I do. I do psychic readings. I do mediumship readings. I've never done one. We do shows, crossing over galleries where we do, live audiences where, we read people. I can do psychic readings, long distance, but I prefer not to try to do mediumship readings that way, because I like to have the people in front of me. I want to connect with their spirits that are around them.
Okay.
That's just my personal preference.
Oh, and then Donald McGuire, he wants to know, do you have a website for your tours? And I have been posting that, but go ahead. Tell them your website.
HauntedHistoryTours.com.
Yeah.
And it's got all the tourist times and locations on it. And you can book right there on the site. Just go to the tour page and you book it. And you get an email confirmation. And if you get your email on your phone, you can just show that to the tour guide.
And one last question. Hold on for a second. One last question. Ex-group home kid. What is your favorite memory from the ghost tour?
My favorite, oh my gosh, it's so many. Favorite memories from the ghost tours. One of my favorite, I think my best favorite memories of the ghost tours is when there's a particular place, it's called Muriel's Restaurant. And before it became Muriel's Restaurant, they used to let us go bring the groups into their carriageway. And we could go inside and close the doors and tell the story in there. And it was, it's a lot of fun. But the only bad thing was that it was a lot of residual energy in there. And it was kind of negative. And people would start crying and people would get angry. And sometimes we would have people freak out in there and have to run out of the place. So that's one of my favorite, I guess it sounds a little morbid, but that would be my favorite memory. But it was a little more interactive, being able to do the more interactive stuff. And then as time went by, the city ordinances got a little more stricter to where you couldn't do that kind of stuff anymore. So.
All right. Let's see. There was one last one. Kata Moon wants to know, what is the best magic supply store in New Orleans?
There's, it depends on what you want. There's several voodoo stores, and again, it just depends on what you want. Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo, Reverend Zombies, they sell more of the artifacts, ritual artifacts, replicas of ritual artifacts, the mask, those kind of fetishes and stuff. One of my favorite voodoo shops is Ursuline's, Authentic Voodoo. It's on Royal Street. She has a website, ursuline's.com. It's actually more of a voodoo boutique, and everything is handcrafted by practitioners. And so you don't just get like a love oil, you get like a love perfume. Oh. And it's very, very exquisite, beautiful, made from oils and herbs from all over the world. So it's my favorite.
And one last one. I have your books. I have 4 Miami Dark Tales, your Tales from the French Quarter, Searching for Spirits, and Afterlife. Now, where can they buy these books?
Those books can be purchased, of course, on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and they can go directly to Dark Oak Press is my publisher, and if you go to darkoakpress.com, you can order the books directly from the publisher. And if you can't find that, you can always go to Amazon and just put in Kalila Smith, and all of my books will come up, and hopefully people will buy them and read them and enjoy them. And I'm hoping very, very soon that we'll have seance experiments out.
Oh, yeah. And please have him get in touch with me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We all have day jobs, and he's a nurse. So, we have to wait for him to have a day off for him to catch up on stuff.
Oh, yeah, sure. Like I said, when your book comes out, whenever you're ready, we can talk about doing a live seance. It would be...
Absolutely.
Oh, my God. The viewers would love it. They would love it.
Absolutely.
Kalila,
and if you come back to New Orleans, we'll have to get you in that seance.
Oh, God, I'd love to take your tour. Oh, my God. Oh, I'm hoping
to... You let me know.
Okay.
You let me know. You can be my guest.
Thank you. Kalila, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was a pleasure to have you and a pleasure to meet you as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, honey. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Hold on, guys. Everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Everybody, don't forget, welcome Jimmy Cortez back into the chat room. And don't forget, it's Royce's birthday. I believe it's tomorrow. So please, everybody, wish Royce H, my mod, a happy birthday. And I want to thank my mods, Royce, Annie, and I'm not sure if Crystal was in here tonight, but if you all are there, I want to thank you so much for modding tonight. I did see Annie. Oh, there she is. Hi, sweet Annie. There's Annie. And Royce, thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here. Let's see. I want to. Oh gosh, guess what? You know what? My show next week is on the haunted Hinsdale house. It is one of the haunted, scariest houses, and the owner wants to come on the show and talk about it. It's supposed to be really, really scary. And so look up the Hinsdale house. He's going to be my guest next Thursday. And also on the October 22nd, they're having an event at the Hinsdale house, and Sean Austin will be there. And then the last Thursday is Vanessa Hogel is coming back, and we're going to air a show on mysterious deaths, disappearances that happen on Halloween. So that'll be our last show for the month. And I hope you all can join us. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. It's just a pleasure to see you all in the chat room. For those that were new tonight, I hope you subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to give the show a like. I'd really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. So we've got two really great shows. Besides tonight, I really enjoyed having Kalila on the show. She's an awesome person. And if you ever get to New Orleans, I'm telling you, oh my God, it is absolutely... the stories I have from our trip. It was amazing. So let me do some shout outs, okay? Oh, Ginger, yeah, and it was Ginger Simmons who, she's the one that sent me, posted on my page she said the Hinsdale house would be a great a location to air, and I did. I contacted him, and little did I know he wanted to come on the show, so it's going to be awesome. So, let's do some shout outs. Sue Ramsey, Sandra Miller, Beat 3 Airspace, Ginger Simmons, Unique Annie, my mod, also Royce, my mod, and Jimmy, honey, welcome back. We're so happy to see you back in the chat room. We've really missed you, and we send all our love to you. Zoe Small, Janet Wolf, Nancy Soplavita, William Fernandez, Cata Moon, Elaine Michael, Janet Wolf, Venter Storm, thank you, Venter, Andrew Cox, that's our driver, our truck driver, Lisa Knox, Tammy Morrison. There's Crystal. Hey, Crystal. Thank you so much for modding as well tonight. Susan Graziano, Lully Tooby, Janice Balt, April Fagan, X Group Home Kid, Tammy Sifford, Miller, Chippetary, Tammy Morrison, Carl White, there you are. Princess Patricia. Anybody else want to shout out? M Dorado 82690. I do have an Instagram. I do. I did, Lully Tooby. I did. Yay, Lully Tooby. Anybody else want to shout out? Yeah, Andrew. Yeah, they do. They do, Beat 3. Jen L. Oh, thank you, Miller. Anybody else? Donald McGuire. Anybody else? April Fagan. Anybody else want to shout out? It was great to see you all in the chat room. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited because I'm less than 100 subscriptions away of having 20,000 subscribers, and I'm really excited about that. It should be maybe at the end of the month I'll have that 20,000. I See Lies. Yes, we all love you, Jimmy. Chris Cruz. Anybody else want to shout out? Kathy Garland. Hi, Kathy. Anybody else want to shout out? Thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciate it. That's exciting for me, 20,000. And you know what? They're all real. As well as my views are all real. Trulty01. Anybody else want to shout out? Oh, thanks, B3. I have a lot of stories to tell. Grizz Lightning Bear, hi. Super Tigress 75. Zin, oh God, Zin Whippers Wind. Did I say that right? Someday I'll just talk about you guys. You have no idea how much I've seen in paranormal wise. Shadow people, Hat Man. I even talked to a ghost. I've got so many stories, so many paranormal stories. It's crazy. It's insane. I really should do a diary. I should start jotting everything down, because then sometimes when I talk about it, I forget about all the things that has happened. Anybody else want to shout out? Thank you, Chipper. You know, too, if you guys ever see my posting for a show, if you would repost it, I'd really appreciate it. I would love to grow our chat room. Sleepy Face Angel. I'd really like to grow the chat room. You know, if you wouldn't mind. Josanna Hootling. If you guys wouldn't mind sharing my show, I'd really like to grow the channel if you guys wouldn't mind. So everyone, thank you so much. My weekend starts tomorrow. I'm very excited, a lot to do. We're expecting finally a big storm starting tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday, because we really need the rain. So everybody, thank you again so much for being here. I love you all. Group hug. And Halloween will be here, I guess, in a couple of weeks. And then the year is going to go by really fast, and this is my favorite time of the year. So group hug to everybody, and love you guys, and thank you again for being here. And I hope to see you next week for the haunted Hinsdale house. It should be awesome. So everybody, good night. I love you. Have a great, safe weekend. Good night, everybody. Love you.